It was a long time ago, back in 2006. After finishing my service in the Army, I returned to my hometown. About a month later, I met her at a local nightclub. She was bold, beautiful, and captivating. Her presence alone lit up the room, and I was drawn to her from the very first glance. We started dating, and as time passed, our connection grew deeper. Our passionate encounters were filled with excitement, the kind of intensity that makes the world around you disappear. A year into our relationship, I realized that what I felt for her was no ordinary infatuation. It was something far stronger, something more profound. I was in love. So, I confessed my feelings, baring my heart to her, and to my joy, she felt the same. Not long after, I proposed. She said yes, and within 2 months, we were married. It all happened so fast, yet it felt so right, like every step we took together was destined. A year later, our daughter was born, and with her arrival, my happiness knew no bounds. I was overwhelmed with joy, as if I had sprouted wings and could fly. My life had a new meaning, and I dedicated all of my love, my energy, and my heart to my two girls. I wanted to be the best husband and father, to give them everything I had. I did everything I could to make life easier for my wife. I would get up in the middle of the night to feed our daughter, change her diapers, and rock her back to sleep. I took pride in being a hands-on father, never letting my wife carry the burden alone. I loved her deeply, and I wanted her to feel that love in every little thing I did. From surprise flowers to small gestures that would bring a smile to her face, I always found a way to spoil her, simply because it made me happy to see her happy. Life felt complete, like we were living in a perfect little world of our own. We had each other, our daughter, and I couldn't have asked for anything more. About 5 years after our daughter was born, I started to notice a shift, a subtle but undeniable distance growing between us. My wife, who had once been so open, so full of life and love, now seemed guarded, distant, and strangely evasive. There was an absence in her gaze, a reluctance to meet my eyes as she used to. Her words of love still flowed, but they felt empty, like they had lost their meaning, like she was merely repeating lines from a script. She insisted that I was her one and only, the love of her life, but I could feel the hollowness in those declarations. Something was off. And then it hit me. There was someone else. I couldn't shake the feeling that a third person had entered our lives, an invisible presence between us, eroding the foundation of trust that we had built over the years. My wife was good, though. She hid her tracks well, expertly covering any trace of infidelity. She followed all the rules of deception, never giving me anything tangible to confront her with. But the heart of a man in love cannot be fooled. I knew something was wrong, and I could no longer ignore the gnawing doubt. I decided to confront her. There were no raised voices, no accusations flung in anger. Instead, it was a difficult, soul-crushing conversation, one filled with quiet pain and the weight of unspoken fears. I asked her what had changed, why I felt this distance between us, why her words seemed laced with something that wasn't quite truth. Is there someone else? I asked, my voice trembling more than I'd like to admit. If there is, we need to talk about it. We owe it to our daughter, to this family, to at least try and save what we have. Her reaction was immediate, fiery, and filled with outrage. How could you think that of me? She spat back, her eyes flashing with indignation. I'm a faithful wife, a good wife. How dare you question my loyalty? Have I not proven my love for you time and time again? Her anger, though fierce, didn't quell my doubts. Instead, it confirmed what I already feared, that she was hiding something, something she wasn't ready to admit. After our conversation, the tension between us didn't ease. In fact, it lingered like a thick cloud, suffocating every room we shared. The words she had spoken, her indignation, echoed in my mind, but they did little to silence the doubt gnawing at my heart. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that her words were nothing more than a carefully constructed veil over a truth she was too afraid to reveal. Desperate for clarity, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I reached out to a family friend, a retired investigator, the kind of man who had seen it all in his years on the force. He was someone who carried an air of authority, the sort that only comes with experience, and though he no longer took on cases, I knew he'd listen out of respect for my mother. I explained my situation to him, my suspicions, my fears, and though I could tell he didn't relish the idea of delving into something so personal, he agreed to help me. I don't usually get involved in these kinds of things anymore, he said, his voice low and gravelly. But for your mother, and because I've known you since you were a kid, I'll do it. Give me a month. If there's something to find, you'll know it. A month. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. The waiting, the not knowing, it was agony. Every day felt like a century. I watched her more closely than ever, every movement, every word, searching for cracks in her mask, for any sign that she was hiding something. But she was flawless, as always, carrying on as though nothing was amiss, all the while deepening my suspicion with her perfection. When the day of reckoning came, I met the investigator at a quiet cafe. He slid a thick envelope across the table towards me, his eyes heavy with unspoken words. I hesitated before opening it, feeling the weight of whatever truth lay inside. My hands shook as I peeled back the flap and pulled out a stack of photographs. There, in crisp, undeniable detail, was the confirmation of my worst fears. Her lover was a colleague from work, someone she'd been seeing for 6 months behind my back. The photos told the story in stark, unforgiving detail. Their clandestine meetings, the stolen glances, the unmistakable intimacy between them. It was all there, laid bare for me to see. The truth hit me with a force I hadn't been prepared for. My vision blurred, my chest tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse under the weight of it all. It was as if the ground had been ripped out from beneath me, and I was free falling into a void I couldn't escape. I managed to compose myself, thanked the investigator with a hollow voice, and made my way home. Every step felt heavy, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had just seen. By the time I reached the front door, I had already rehearsed the conversation 100 times in my head. But when the moment finally came, words seemed inadequate. When she walked through the door later that evening, I was waiting for her, the photographs still tucked in my pocket. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing but a cold, distant detachment. "Do you have anything you want to tell me?" I asked, my voice calm, almost too calm. "We can still end this amicably." She looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion, or was it fear? "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone defensive. "What is this nonsense now? I told you, you're imagining things. There's no one else." The familiar anger rose in my chest, but I swallowed it down. Without a word, I pulled the photos from my pocket and placed them on the table in front of her. The color drained from her face as she looked at them, her mouth opening slightly, as if to protest, but no words came. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and began to pack my things. There was no point in continuing the conversation. The lies had already done their damage, and there was nothing left to salvage. Who could have known how much it took to maintain that calm exterior? Inside, a volcano was raging, ready to explode and annihilate everything in its path. But I held on. I gritted my teeth and kept packing, my hands shaking ever so slightly as I folded my clothes, determined to leave with whatever dignity I had left. And then came the flood. A torrent of words, accusations, blame. It was as if a dam had broken, and every ounce of her guilt and fear poured out, trying to drown me in it. I stood there, frozen, as she unleashed every possible excuse, every twisted justification. I heard things I never thought I'd hear. Apparently, men are only cheated on when they're deeply loved. Yes, you heard that right. According to her, without love, cheating wouldn't even be interesting. She even went as far as to say that the sex with her lover was nothing special, that she had thought of me the entire time. Can you imagine? In the middle of her betrayal, I was somehow still at the center of her thoughts, as if that could somehow make things better. And then, the promises began. She swore that from this moment on, she would be the most faithful wife in the world, that I would be her God, her everything. She begged for a second chance, swore she'd change, that our love would be stronger than ever. But none of it mattered anymore. The words that once might have meant something were now just hollow echoes in the empty space between us. As I walked to the door, suitcase in hand, she collapsed into full-blown hysteria. She fell to her knees, clutching at my legs, sobbing uncontrollably, begging me not to go. It was heartbreaking, a scene straight out of some tragic play, but it only deepened my resolve. I couldn't stay. I couldn't live with that betrayal hanging over us like a shadow, no matter how much she begged. I went to my mother's place. I told her everything, every agonizing detail. Her reaction was calm, almost too calm. She didn't cry or shout or offer advice like I thought she might. She simply looked at me with a sadness in her eyes that told me she understood everything, perhaps more than I did at the time. "Son," she said quietly, "you're a man. Only you can decide how to live. I won't give you advice, because only you know what's right for you." And that was it. No lectures, no pity. Just a simple acknowledgement that I had to find my own way through this. I was grateful for that. At that moment, I wasn't sure I could handle anyone else telling me what I should or shouldn't do. But to say I was okay would be a lie. I was far from it. The pain was unbearable, unlike anything I had ever experienced. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every bite of food turned my stomach until I was vomiting bile, and then, eventually, blood. The physical toll was alarming, but it was the emotional wreckage that nearly destroyed me. I felt like I was dying from the inside out. It took 2 weeks for me to force myself to live again. I had to push through the pain, force myself to fight back against the overwhelming darkness. I threw myself into sport, desperate for something to take my mind off the torment. I worked out until I could barely stand, running, lifting, pushing myself to the limit. Push-ups, pull-ups, dips, weights. I did anything and everything I could to exhaust my body enough to quiet my mind. I made myself eat again, bit by bit, even when I had no appetite. I started going for walks, clearing my head, trying to rebuild some semblance of a routine. Little by little, I clawed my way back, determined not to let this break me completely. I filed for divorce. It was 4 months of hell, pure and unrelenting. My phone never stopped ringing. Calls from my wife, from my mother-in-law, from every relative she could summon to her cause. On the streets, she would appear, trying to catch my attention, begging for a moment of conversation. It was always the same. Tearful pleas, apologies that felt rehearsed, and a desperate chorus of, "Please forgive your silly wife." She blamed it all on foolishness, on a lapse in judgment, claiming that everyone makes mistakes, that surely I could give her another chance. But I couldn't. The pain was still too raw, the betrayal too deep. We were officially divorced on the second attempt, the first time postponed as she fought to stall the inevitable. And even after the papers were signed, she didn't let me go. The calls continued, though less frequent, and every so often, I'd spot her watching me from across the street or hear through mutual friends how she was struggling, still hoping for reconciliation. But I was done. I had no more strength left to fight against her desperation or my own lingering sorrow. 3 months after the divorce, I knew I needed to escape. I booked a cruise on a liner that sailed along the Amur River, hoping that the vast waters and open skies might bring me some peace, or at least a break from the emotional weight I'd been carrying for so long. It was the kind of journey that promised solitude, a chance to reflect and, perhaps, start anew. The first evening on board, I found myself seated at a small table in the ship's restaurant. It was a quiet, elegant place, filled with the soft hum of conversations and the clinking of silverware. Across from me sat a woman, stunning, with a beauty that seemed to glow from within. But her eyes were filled with an unmistakable sadness, as if she, too, was carrying some heavy burden that had dimmed her inner light. We introduced ourselves, exchanged the usual pleasantries, but it didn't take long before the conversation turned deeper. There was something about her presence, the way she listened so intently, that made me open up. Maybe it was the anonymity of the setting, the knowledge that we were strangers who had nothing to lose by sharing our truths. Whatever it was, I found myself telling her everything. I spoke of the betrayal, the heartache, the endless months of torment. Words poured out of me like water from a broken dam. And with every word, I felt lighter. It was as though, for the first time, I was able to release the grip that pain had on me. She listened without interrupting, her sad eyes never wavering from mine. And when I finished, there was no pity in her expression, just understanding and a deep, quiet empathy. She didn't need to say much. Her presence alone was enough to soothe the raw edges of my soul. That night, as we parted ways, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel so lost. The ache was still there, but it was no longer unbearable. There was a strange sense of calm, as if, somehow, in sharing my story with her, I had begun to heal. As it turned out, she had her own story of heartbreak. Her engagement had ended in tragedy when her fiancé betrayed her while she was pregnant. The weight of that betrayal had been compounded by an even greater sorrow. She had lost the baby. Her eyes, those sorrowful, knowing eyes, told me that pain had become a familiar companion for her, too. We shared more than just the surface-level charm of the cruise. We shared a history of broken promises and shattered dreams. After the cruise, we began to see each other more frequently. It started with casual meetups, long walks along the riverbank, quiet dinners where we spoke about everything and nothing, lingering conversations about life and loss. It was as if we were two souls drawn together by the common thread of our grief, yet determined to move past it. Slowly, I began to feel something shift between us. The heaviness of my past lifted a little more each time we were together, and in its place, something new, something tender, began to grow. She was becoming more than just a friend or a companion. She was becoming someone I could trust with my heart again. Months passed, and the feelings between us deepened. There was no rush, no urgency, but a natural progression towards something that felt inevitable. She became a constant in my life, and the more I got to know her, the more I admired her resilience, her strength, and her quiet grace. I had thought love was a distant memory, but with her, it began to feel like a possibility again. About 6 months after that first fateful meeting on the cruise, I knew it was time. I could no longer imagine my life without her in it. So, one evening, under a soft, glowing sky, I asked her to be my wife. My heart raced as I spoke the words, though deep down, I knew what her answer would be. She smiled, that same gentle smile I had grown to love, and she said yes. In that moment, it felt as though the wounds of the past, though they would never fully disappear, had finally started to heal. But before we could truly move forward, we had a serious conversation, one I will never forget. She looked at me with those same, earnest eyes and said, "You know my story. You know how deeply I was hurt by betrayal, how I lost everything when the man I loved was unfaithful, even while I was carrying our child. I need you to understand that if you ever betray me, I won't forgive you. No matter what we've built together, whether we have children, whether we've shared years of happiness, no matter what we own together, I'll walk away. I won't be able to bear it again." Her voice didn't waver, and her words were like a solemn vow, spoken with a gravity that left no room for doubt. Then she took my hand and added, "But I swear to you, with everything that is sacred to me, I will never betray you. I will never hurt you the way you were hurt before. I can't and I won't, because I know the pain too well. I know what it can do to a person, and I love you too much to ever put you through that." Her words hung in the air, and in that moment, I understood the depth of her commitment. It wasn't just a promise. It was a mutual understanding that the love we had found together was fragile, and it needed to be protected. We were both scarred, but we were also both determined never to hurt each other the way we had been hurt in the past. And here we are, after all these years, together, still. I can't quite describe the depth of the happiness I feel, but it's real and it's profound. I look at her, my love, my little one, as I often call her, and I realize that I am the luckiest man alive. She is everything to me. Every time I see her smile or hear her laugh, it's as though the world brightens just a little more, and I know, deep in my soul, that I am the most cherished man on this earth. We've built something beautiful together. We've weathered our pasts, confronted the shadows that once threatened to pull us apart, and emerged stronger, more united. And it wasn't just about moving on from the pain of betrayal or loss. It was about creating something new, something pure, out of the broken pieces of our lives. Love is fragile, yes, but it's also resilient when nurtured with care. I've made it my mission to ensure she never doubts my love, and in return, she has given me more than I ever thought possible. We have 2 incredible children now, and they are the light of our lives. Every time I look at them, I am overwhelmed with gratitude for the second chance I was given, for the family we've created, for the love that fills our home, their laughter, their joy, the way they look at us with so much trust and affection. It's everything. I can't imagine life without them, and I can't imagine life without her. Every day, I make a conscious effort to show her how much she means to me. It's in the little things, the quiet moments we steal together after the kids are asleep, the way I hold her hand as we walk, the surprise breakfasts in bed, or the flowers I bring home just because. I've learned, through the hard lessons of life, that love needs to be cultivated, cherished, and protected. And I've done everything in my power to ensure that she always feels loved, always feels seen, and never doubts her place in my heart. I know now that happiness doesn't just happen. It's a choice, an ongoing commitment to each other. We've chosen to love each other every day, despite the challenges, despite the inevitable ups and downs that come with life. And that's what makes it all the more special, knowing that after everything, we've chosen each other over and over again. So, here I am, years later, filled with a happiness I didn't think I'd ever find again. And to those reading this, I want to say, treasure love when you find it. Cherish the people who stand by you, who weather the storms with you. Take care of your relationships, nurture them with patience, trust, and unwavering dedication. Life is too short not to hold on to the ones you love with everything you have. As for me, I'm living proof that happiness after heartbreak is not just possible, it's real. And it's even more beautiful than I could have imagined. We've built a life filled with love, joy, and laughter. I am loved, I am cherished, and I am beyond blessed. So, yes, treasure love, my friends. Be happy. Because when you finally find that person who makes your soul feel at home, there is no greater feeling in the world.